All right, and we have some news just coming in. The External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has opened up on what next after disengagement. Jaishankar says pullback of the troops is on the cards. Priority is to find ways to separate the troops is what is now being said.
What we negotiated just now on October 21st was the last set of what we call disengagement agreements, which essentially means that after the summer of 2020, Chinese and Indian troops have been deployed, have been forward deployed, you can say, along the line of actual control in distances which were extremely concerning, and the priority has been to find ways of separating the troops, which is why the word disengagement, having them go back to their normal operating basis as far as possible, and also resuming patrol in the way in which it used to be done in 2020.
All right, so you heard there from the External Affairs Minister Jaishankar talking about what next. Disengagement over, pullback of troops is next. A very significant statement there has come in, Milan, from the External Affairs Minister, who's spoken about the fact that now pulling out of troops is going to be the next step, and this was but expected, isn't it? Part of the plan, really, if I can say that.
Rightly so, Sneha, because the disengagement has happened from both the countries. But what essentially Jaishankar is now pointing at is the de-escalation, and where the troops need to be in a prior to 2020 situation is what is being discussed. Of course, Dr. Jaishankar also highlights that within the bilaterals that have happened between the leaders of the two countries, as well as the subsequent meetings that are supposed to take place between the foreign ministry here as well as the NSA, is where exactly the troops will be in separate engaging zones. Of course, respectfully saying that the situation needs to move to prior to 2020, which is the goal at which India is currently working on with China. And there have been statements from the Chinese spokesperson as well on the same. So de-escalation essentially is being worked out at the moment. Of course, India making it very clear that disengagement has happened from both sides, and highlighting the point there by Dr. Jaishankar that both countries are big giants moving at a very fast pace, and diplomatic ties between the two countries are essentially moving in the right direction now after the disengagement, the forward-looking point to the de-escalation.
All right. Yeah. Milan, be with us. I'm just going to come back to you in a moment from now here, listening to what the External Affairs Minister said.
What we negotiated just now on October 21st was the last set of what we call disengagement agreements, which essentially means that after the summer of 2020, Chinese and Indian troops have been deployed, have been forward deployed, you can say, along the line of actual control in distances which were extremely concerning, and the priority has been to find ways of separating the troops, which is why the word disengagement, having them go back to their normal operating basis as far as possible, and also resuming patrol in the way in which it used to be done in 2020.
My colleague also getting in more details on that story. It's a 4-year military standoff. Finally, that shift is ending, and pulling back of troops is only but expected, isn't it?
That's correct, Sneha. If I may use the term, the easy part of this entire normalization process has just been completed, and as we reported yesterday, patrolling has begun, in the very troublesome Depsang area. But now's where the real hard work begins. Now's where the two sides really earn their money in terms of trying to, bring tempers down. The disengagement is complete. Now comes the next step, which is de-escalation. Now, de-escalation involves the much more tricky, complicated and logistically challenging task of moving back your heavy machinery, your tanks, your armored personnel carriers, your missile batteries, your radar sites, basically the war stores, the firepower from the frontline areas, a few kilometers backwards. The reason for creating this distance between the two sides, which have so far been in an eyeball to eyeball situation, is to create that margin of safety in such a way that in case tempers actually fly, neither side has the ability to attack each other immediately, and there is enough time, for things to be actually calmed down by the higher authorities, including the brigade commander, the divisional commander, the corps commander, etc. But this is going to be tricky, Sneha, because what has been pulled back so far, as Dr. Jaishankar mentioned, are the troops and the non-permanent posts. But the more tricky aspect of permanent positions, including India's own, it's not only China that has those, even India has permanent sites and a huge amount of firepower in that area. Bringing those back is going to be a slightly more delicate task, which I imagine is going to take more time than this first phase.
You know, what else is expected apart from this? Shiv, if you could just give us an idea about what to expect in the next few weeks or months or so, as far as the relationship between both the countries are concerned, which have only, worsened over the last 4 odd years or so, isn't it?
Let me paint you a specific picture so all of our viewers understand, Sneha. Once the standoff began between the two sides, once the number of friction points, increased in number, once the Galwan clash happened in June 2020, the existing standoff areas, became hot zones, if I may call it that, where the possibility of an escalation could happen. These are places where frontline troops of both sides are separated by very, very small distances, sometimes as small as just a few, tens of meters, not even hundreds of meters, tens of meters. And therefore, once the standoff began, once the huge mobilization began and India needed to respond to that, both sides have deployed more than just troops. There are tank regiments on both sides in the Depsang area. There are huge convoys of trucks. There are, support logistics bases. There are helipads. There are surface-to-air missile systems. There are radar sites. There's a lot of electronic equipment, to detect air intrusions and things like that. There is artillery, huge amount of artillery that's been deployed in these areas. And therefore, the de-escalation is going to involve not the slightly more elementary task of moving back troops and tents and things like that, to now moving back your heavy firepower. No side wants to do that because it takes a huge amount of time, effort and mobilization to bring all that firepower to the front line. So moving that back means that the two sides are basically saying war is off the table. When you've got that kind of firepower just a few tens of meters from each other, it means war is definitely, within the realm of possibility between two countries. Once you de-escalate, that goes off the table, and that's why it's going to be a complicated decision. It won't happen overnight. It will take days, weeks. It'll happen in phases as well. But that's what the intention is, and that's what Dr. Jaishankar is signaling.
Significant step, nevertheless, in diffusing tensions between both the countries there. I'm going to thank you, Shiv, for joining in with your perspective. Milind Sharma with her inputs on that story as well.